Don't settle for bad socks. Get comfort and grip at an affordable price with Pure Grip Socks Pro. Choose from 18 different colors at puregripsocks.com.
Year after year, the Nike Mercurial series has remained undeniably extremely popular, but as much as everybody wants the super high-tech and also super expensive versions, not everybody can afford it, which means the boots inside this box have a very strong chance of being one of the most popular boots of 2024. But does the fit, feel, and performance justify the popularity? Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to the brand new Nike Zoom Mercurial Vapor 16 Academy, the second tier takedown option in the new Mercurial lineup, where the Elite model runs you $260 for a Vapor. The Academy variation is going to cost just $85. And if mid-cut boots are your thing, you do have the option of the Superfly 10 Academy retailing for an extra $10 at $95. Where regardless of what I say in this review, this is going to be a super popular takedown model and historically one that has been pretty decent value for money. However, for 2024, I do think they've made some really nice improvements to this new Vapor 16 variation compared to the Vapor 15 that it replaces. I want to talk about exactly what those changes are in today's video as we go over all the details of the Vapor 16 Academy, including how they fit and feel on feet, ultimately concluding where these stand amongst other sub $100 takedown models if you're looking for a new pair of football boots on a bit of a tighter budget. So if you're interested in learning more, please stick around, and if you are interested in a pair for yourself, you can pick them up below their normal retail price by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes via the first link down below. And as always, if you enjoy the unsugar-coated, brutally honest content on the channel, don't forget to drop a like on the video and make sure you're subscribed if you haven't already so you don't miss out on my reviews of all the latest football boots of 2024. So first things first, it must be said, despite having a very similar look when compared to the Vapor 15 Academy this boot replaces, they have changed effectively every single element other than the central lacing system and the construction of the tongue. Where the upper is still made from a material that Nike is referring to as Nike Skin, although as we've seen over the years, Nike Skin as a material has been called so many different things where it almost doesn't mean anything at this point. Historically, Nike Skin has been a mesh-based synthetic originally introduced on that OG Hypervenom Phantom 1. However, since then, it's been changed around and used with so many different materials, some softer, some more plasticky, some more mesh-based, some more synthetic-based. This definitely trends more on the mesh-based side of things, and compared to the Vapor 15 Academy it replaces, it's significantly softer, significantly more pliable, and just less structured overall, that I think in turn results in a much better fitting pair of football boots, but also one that is significantly more comfortable, especially out of the box. If you look closely at the main body of the upper, you'll notice a distinct chevron pattern to the mesh base of this material. Then you have your thin layer of polyurethane on the surface and a pretty standard nylon lining material, as you'll find for most Academy tier Nike takedown models. Also, from a construction standpoint, they've maintained that seam kind of running on its diagonal on either side of the foot, where it transitions into a slightly different type of mesh, basically for the rear quarter of the football boot, that from a structure standpoint doesn't really change all that much, but it's interesting nonetheless that it does mimic that top-end Elite model upper construction a little bit closer than it perhaps needed to, but I think it is all to the benefit of the final product, in that this, similar to the Flyknit, Gripknit, Atom Knit material of that Elite model, is super pliable, has a lot more of that sock-like sensation than the previous generation, which definitely trended more on the rigid plasticky side of things, and overall just feels really nice on feet. Out of the box comfort is a gigantic improvement, and in terms of touch on the ball, because it's so thin, you're getting that barefoot feel. Because it's so pliable, the boots feel very natural on feet. The only downside is, when compared to that higher end model, is that you're not going to get grip knit. There is no grip element to the surface of the upper. For the most part, it's been left relatively smooth. There's a little bit of texture from the mesh base itself, but for the most part, in terms of extra grip on the ball, there really isn't any, which would kind of relate this back to pretty well every other Mercurial model, where realistically, extra grip has never really been a feature up until just now. Across the top of the foot, you're going to find a nice deep central lacing system, allowing for great overall adjustability and lockdown once you've tied the laces tight. The tongue itself is made from this kind of synthetic microfiber material, and it's what I would describe as kind of like a mock one-piece upper, in that it is technically a standalone tongue. However, they've connected it to the sides of the upper, basically from the bottom half down, and then from the halfway point up, the tongue is completely detached. So as long as you loosen the laces, the opening for the boot ends up being just like it would be for a traditional U-throat construction, which I really like and does kind of separate the Academy tier variation from the higher end versions of the Mercurial, which could actually be viewed as a major pro depending on personal preference. Could the actual material of the tongue be a little bit nicer? For sure, but realistically, when the boots are on your feet and the laces are tied tight, it's not really an element that you notice or affects the experience in any way at all. Moving to the rear, this is one area that I think most people wouldn't even think twice about, but they've actually made some really nice improvements compared to the previous generation, where at the opening, they had these little extension pieces to the upper at the very end, kind of at the base of your ankle, that had that potential of kind of just digging in to the front side of your ankle or top of the foot, and generally was just kind of unnecessary, along with what I would argue was slightly bulkier than necessary shaping and general construction to the heel of the football boot. This time around, they've kept things extremely simple and streamlined. It's low cut at the front, it extends slightly at the back, has an internal plastic heel counter, now features a super soft lining material rather than the synthetic leather of the previous generation, and also has plenty of padding with shaping that feels like what you'd expect on a pair of higher end, much more expensive football boots, where I think the back of this boot in general just feels fantastic considering the price point. And then internally, you are of course going to get that Air Zoom branding there on the back of the heel, which would imply that you're getting Air Zoom tech underneath your feet. And technically you are, although it's very, very different from that top-end Elite model, in that you won't find a 3/4 length zoom unit basically from the toe to the base of your heel, but instead, if you remove the insole, there's a tiny little zoom unit underneath your heel, and that's it. You're not going to find any kind of full-length zoom air cushioning, and realistically, this zoom unit under your heel isn't one that you can really feel, where I think there's going to be plenty of people that buy these boots, never pull the insoles out, and would have no idea that their boots actually featured any form of Air Zoom tech. And then the insole, fully removable. I'll give you a quick look at that as well. Mesh liner on the surface, pretty standard in that regard, but you can see it is 3D molded. You can see the little cutout for the zoom unit, so that gives you a pretty good idea of the size of the thing. And then they have these little kind of strips of sticky adhesive to prevent it from sliding around, which I really do like. Again, for the price point, this is above average in terms of overall quality compared to what you'll find from other brands, but overall, nothing too crazy. Which brings us to the base, where you'll find all new sole plate and stud pattern tooling, where the new sole plate itself does look very similar to that of the high-end model. You can see it kind of has that wavy pattern to the central studs running through the forefoot. However, because you don't have the 4-foot length zoom unit, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to have that there, although it does feel quite good. And I would say the sole plate as a whole is maybe a little bit more flexible than what we had from the previous generation. That could be a side effect of the upper in general, just being more pliable this time around, making the boot as a whole feel less stiff, but still surprisingly responsive in feel considering the sub $100 price point, and well above average compared to just about any other football boot that you're gonna find for around $80. And then, just like we've seen for the last several generations of Academy tier Mercurial, you can't actually get a true FG stud pattern. Instead, they sell the Academy as an FG-MG, which means that you are going to get some conical studs kind of thrown into the mix on the usual FG setup, where you can see you get those chevron blades on the lateral side, but then you get two conical studs on the medial side, and the same thing goes for the heel. The normal blades at the front, the conical studs at the back, which does result in a stud pattern that is technically a little bit less aggressive because you have those rounded studs. But the idea behind it is that this is an option to wear on basically any type of playing surface, whether it's natural grass or artificial grass. I don't necessarily think this is the best choice for use on artificial grass just because of these super aggressive blades that still provide tons and tons of bite on just about any playing surface, but they do also offer an AG option for the Academy tier Mercurial. So if you do play a lot on artificial grass, that is still a very good direction to go into. Overall though, great traction. Again, considering the $85 price point, it's really hard to pick on anything they've done with this sole plate and traction setup. And then there's the weight. $85 for the Academy tier version and $260 for the Elite Vapor 16. Which one is lighter and by how much? Both in the same size, 9.5 US. We'll start off with the top end model, and you can see that they weigh in at 6.7 ounces, the equivalent of 189 grams. Change the scale back to ounces, and we'll throw on the Academy tier version, and you can see that they weigh in at 8 ounces exactly, the equivalent of 226 grams, which is a weight difference of nearly 30 grams, obviously in favor of the Elites, which is the noticeably lighter football boot, both in hand as well as on feet. But that is not to say that the Academy tier version is a heavy pair. You can only expect so much at this price point when talking about the speed boot category, and when compared to its competitors, it's actually one of the lighter options. On feet, I'm really impressed with the Vapor 16 Academy for a few different reasons. The first is that compared to the previous generation, this definitely trends more towards the softer, kind of more pliable side of things versus the more plasticky synthetic feel that we got from not just the Vapor 15 Academy, but really the Vapor 15 and Superfly 9 in general. Even at the Elite tier, the transition from Vapor Posit Plus into more of a Flyknit base in that grip knit material for the main body of the upper, it just kind of relates the Mercurial series back to the early Flyknit days of when that material was first introduced into the world of football boots, which personally I'm a big fan of. I also think, despite the overall shaping of the boot seemingly not being that different from the previous generation, because the material itself is so much more pliable this time around, it wraps your foot that much more closely and really does make these feel more like the higher end Mercurials in terms of giving you that one-to-one connection, where typically you can give a boot a really aggressive shape, but if the material doesn't move nicely with your foot, it just ends up feeling a little bit clunky. I don't get that sensation with these at all. The heel, like I mentioned, feels fantastic, a huge improvement over the previous generation. The sole plate also feels really nice considering the price point, and the zoom unit underneath the heel, if you really just kind of squish your heels into the boot, you can definitely tell that there's something there. But in terms of general use when you're actually playing in the boots, I don't think it's all that noticeable. As far as width is concerned, like most Mercurial models, I don't think these are ideal for somebody with really wide feet, but that is not to say that a wide-footed person couldn't wear them, as long as they like that super tight fit that kind of comes along with a Nike Mercurial model. It's part of the reason why this line has been so popular, although if you've only ever worn Academy tier ones, I think these do definitely have a little bit of a tighter wrap relating it more to the higher end models than what we've seen in the past, which may be a little bit surprising to some people that maybe are used to that slightly more relaxed fit that is typically associated with an Academy tier football boot. Nonetheless, as long as you don't have excessively wide feet but like a tight overall fit, I do think these will work for most foot types. And as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. So if you are looking to get a pair for yourself, I would strongly recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. So in conclusion, I'm pleasantly surprised by the Vapor 16 Academy. Despite looking so much like the model it replaces, pretty well everything has been changed in one way or another, and pretty well all of those changes benefit the final product in terms of fit, feel, and overall performance. They fit great, the upper feels good on foot as well as on the ball, the traction is fantastic, the sole plate doesn't feel cheap, the boots as a whole still maintain an overall relatively lightweight construction, and I think perhaps most importantly, and something that we don't always see from a lot of takedown models of super high-tech football boots, they still manage to feel like a pair of Mercurials without costing an arm and a leg that you would typically have to pay for an elite tier model. And don't get things twisted, these feel nothing like the Vapor 16 Elite in that you don't get the grip knit on the upper and you don't get the 3/4 length zoom unit, which I would argue are kind of the two most distinctive elements of this new generation of Mercurial that make it such a special pair of football boots. But considering the $85 price tag, and with some coupon codes, you're around $70, $75, I really don't think you can go wrong with the Vapor 16 Academy if you're looking for that Mercurial fit and feel without the crazy high price tag. It's without a doubt one of the best sub $100 takedown models currently available.